So the word of the day today is renounce. In the baptismal rite, we do that profession of faith where the priest or deacon asks, do you renounce sin? But there's a second part of that phrase. It's, do you renounce sin so as to live in the freedom of the children of God? So when you renounce the sin, it allows you to live in the freedom of God. So we have to renounce or reject, to turn away from one thing to embrace another. And I was thinking about the same thing is true in monastic life. So we see someone taking vows, and a monk or a nun will renounce the things of the world, having possessions, for example, to adopt a life of simplicity that includes shared possessions with others. So realistically, if you think about it in our lives, we got to give up something. We have to renounce something to gain something else. So if we want to adopt a healthy lifestyle, we might have to renounce fast food, which would be devastating, but and too many sweets, that kind of thing. If we want to spend more time and energy in spiritual reading, we may have to renounce reading dime store novels or too much television or gaming to make the space to be able to do that. So, in fact, I've even read that it was that was the original spirit of avoiding meat during Lent. Meat at the time was a lot more expensive than buying fish. Of course, that's kind of the opposite now, but meat was more expensive than fish. So if you ate fish, you could take the money that you saved by not eating meat and give it to the poor. So the idea was, I'm going to renounce something, not kind of for its own sake, but I'm going to give up one thing to be able to do something else. So in today's gospel, kind of with that as the backdrop, Jesus says that you can't be a follower of his unless you hate your family and yourself. Well, that's a pretty strong word. Right. And so we can really, do you want us to hate ourselves? Well, again, we go back to the original Greek word that translates into hate. And that Greek word actually implies the idea of getting priorities straight. So when he says hate your family and yourself, what he's really saying is make your family and yourself a lower priority than your relationship with God, because nothing is more important than that. And so Jesus is saying, I am more important than your family or yourselves. And so that's why at the end of the gospel, he wraps up by saying, if any one of you does not renounce all of his possessions, you cannot be my disciple. And again, he's not saying you can't own anything. You can't have any possessions. He's just saying keep your priorities straight. Don't attach yourself to things of the world, because when you do that, those possessions may get in the way of serving God. So in the first reading from Paul to the Romans, St. Paul cites a couple of specific commandments. He cites don't steal, don't covet. And what he's really saying is the same thing as Jesus. When we steal something, or even if we want to have something that somebody else already has or owns, we are beginning then to place our own possessions and the things that we own, our worldly attachments, ahead of our relationship with Christ. And instead, St. Paul says we love God by loving one another. So it's always always comes down to a question of priorities. There's so much we can do in this world that's easy to pass off and say, well, I can't possibly do that. So here's a practical level, little commercial. We got the Share-a-thon coming up next week. So if you go out to dinner with a friend or a spouse, you'll easily spend $50 for 2 meals, tip and tax. So what we might suggest is renounce, let go of 2 dinners out, and make a couple of simple meals at home instead, and use that $100 to make a donation to Annunciation Radio.
Amen.
That's exactly what Jesus is getting at in the gospel today. If we renounce some things that we want to possess for ourselves, it gives us the resources to give them to someone else. And what better resource than to give to Annunciation Radio to help God do his work by supporting your ministry?
Couldn't have said that better myself.
No, thank you very much. But what a wonderful reminder to us that giving should include some sacrifice. It shouldn't be easily given. If you've got $5 in your pocket and there's no pain involved in giving it, it's still generous, but the gift that's given with some sacrifice is greater.
That's why the lady who gave the 1 coin gave more than anybody else, because that's all she had.
Amen. Thank you, Deacon Dan.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks for joining us today.